Today is an exciting day, ladies and gentlemen, because today I get to talk about my favorite film of all time, The Dark Knight, released in 2008. This, of course, was the second film in Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight trilogy following Batman Begins, and it's considered by many people, myself included, to be the greatest superhero film ever made. As teased in the end of Batman Begins, this film brings in the Joker, played by Heath Ledger. And I gotta tell you, Heath Ledger as the Joker, probably my favorite actor performance of all time. Like, holy shit, I cannot describe to you. If you've never seen the movie, I cannot do justice in words how good he was in this movie. And what's funny is, nobody would admit it now. Nobody would admit it now. But everybody was shitting on it when he was cast as the Joker, because he was coming off some crap films, you know, and people were like, oh, yeah, Heath Ledger, he's not gonna do any good as the Joker, but he did. He did it better than anyone else. Unfortunately, though, the biggest tragedy of this is that Ledger never got to see his performance, as on January 22nd, 2008, a week short of 7 months before this film was released, Ledger died of a drug overdose. He was only 28 years old at the time of his death, and it's a damn shame we couldn't see what he could have done in the future. In addition to the critical acclaim, though, Ledger did win some awards for his role, including the Golden Globe Award for Best Supporting Actor in a Motion Picture in 2009. In addition to Ledger, the movie also added Aaron Eckhart, who played Harvey Dent. And pretty much all of the former cast from Batman Begins returned. Christian Bale was back as Batman, Michael Caine as Alfred, Gary Oldman as James Gordon. Morgan Freeman was back as Lucius Fox, but one person was not back. Katie Holmes, who played Rachel Dawes in Batman Begins, decided to turn down The Dark Knight to make a film called Mad Money with Diane Keaton and Queen Latifah. And Mad Money made only $26 million at the box office on a $22 million budget, so yeah, that didn't go too well. The role of Rachel Dawes was instead in this film played by Maggie Gyllenhaal, who, yes, is the older sister of Jake Gyllenhaal. So what makes this film my favorite? Well, really just everything. The writing was incredible, the acting was top tier, the visual effects were great, especially for 2008, the music was incredible, I mean, just everything. The action was awesome, you know, especially the infamous interrogation scene with Batman and the Joker. Apparently, Ledger asked Bale to actually hit him in that scene so it looked more realistic. Like, there was just a different feel about this movie. There's never been one quite made like it, especially not a superhero film. This movie also came dangerously close to being rated R. In fact, if you watch this film, you'll notice there's no blood. Go back and watch the film, you may not have noticed before, there's no blood in the entire movie. And that's because there couldn't be blood. They had to take the blood out in order to make sure they could keep PG-13. And sometimes I do wonder what would have happened if they had just said fuck it and made this an R-rated film, because my god, that would have been incredible. If they made it R-rated though, they probably wouldn't have made as much money. And they made a lot of money, just over $1 billion. And while it certainly would not be the last, it was the first superhero film ever to gross over $1 billion. And you're correct in assuming that this did indeed kick off the superhero boom. Iron Man was actually released just a couple months after this film, which means this film came out before the MCU even started. You could also strongly argue that as far as DC Comics films go, this was the peak, because they've never quite reached these heights since. But how exactly did this legendary battle between the Batman and the Joker go down? Well, we're about to find out right now as we take a look back at The Dark Knight, 2008. So our film begins in Gotham City with 6 masked men robbing a mob bank. At the request of their boss, the Joker, they all end up taking each other out one by one until one man remains. And that man is revealed to be the Joker himself, who scares the piss out of the bank manager by putting a smoke grenade in his mouth. Speaking of the mob, one of the mob bosses named Cheechin is doing a trade with the Scarecrow, otherwise known as Jonathan Crane. And can I just say, even though it was small, I'm really happy that Cillian Murphy got a role in this movie. Like, he really deserved it after Batman Begins. And then they're ambushed by Batman, and they have guns? Wait a minute, Batman doesn't use guns. And sure enough, here comes the real Batman, and he does Batman stuff and beats the shit out of everybody. So after Wayne Manor burned down at the end of the last film, Bruce and Alfred have moved into a penthouse. However, Bruce spends most of his time in an underground workshop where he works on Batman stuff. Bruce decides he wants to gain the favor of the town's new district attorney, Harvey Dent, who happens to be dating Rachel. Speaking of Dent and Rachel, they're at trial right now trying to put Sal Maroni away, who is the heir to Carmine Falcone's throne. phone. Dent's key witness double-crosses him though, and then tries to shoot him, but Dent knocks him the fuck out. Later on, Harvey meets with Lieutenant Gordon, and they set up a plan to raid the mob banks. Back at Wayne Enterprises, Lucius Fox is trying to set up a deal with a corrupt Chinese accountant named Lau. However, him and Bruce decide not to take the deal, as they think Lau's money is shady. Harvey and Rachel later on are out to dinner, and they just so happen to be met up by Bruce and his new Russian ballerina girlfriend. During the dinner, Bruce is impressed with how much Harvey wants to bring criminals to justice, and decides to hold a fundraiser for him. Speaking of those mob boss criminals, it appears that somebody decided to take Lau up on his offer. Lau was able to move all of the mob boss's money to secret accounts right before Gordon and the police raided the banks. However, about $68 million of the money was stolen by the Joker, who just so happens to be here. So after doing some magic, the Joker proposes a deal to the mob about killing the Batman, and all he wants is half of all their money. A third mob boss, Gamble, gets fed up with this shit though, and he puts a bounty on the Joker's head. Oh, and hey, look at that didn't take long at all, somebody killed him. Yep, just kidding. And after telling Gamble a story about how he got these scars, the Joker decides to give him some scars of his own. Meanwhile, Lucius is flown out to China to meet with Lau, simply to tell him that he's gonna have to decline his offer. That wasn't the only reason though, as he's planted a cell phone inside the building. Turns out Bruce is also here as the police have asked Batman to bring Lau back to Gotham. And sure enough, late at night, when the Batman is all ready to swoop in, that cell phone causes all the power to go out. Batman then moves in and once again does Batman stuff, kicking some ass, kidnapping Lau, and he takes him back to America. So with testimony from Lau and the help from a judge named Cirillo, Harvey decides to try over 500 people at once, because fuck it. The mayor warns him about the dangers of doing this, but Harvey seems pretty much up to it. But then surprise! Batman jump scare. Holy shit, somebody killed Batman. Of course it's not actually Batman, and the Joker interrupts the news, revealing that he killed one of the Batman impersonators. I'm sure that's nothing to worry about though, it's time for the fundraiser. And while this fundraiser is going on, good things are not. Judge Cirillo is blown up in her car, the police chief is poisoned, and oh shit, here's the Joker at the fundraiser after Harvey. Luckily, Bruce was able to get Harvey to a safe place, and he goes to change into Batman. The Joker terrifies the party guests and meets Rachel, and decides to tell her a different story about how he got his scars. Batman doesn't really care much about his story though, as it's time to kick some ass again. The Joker then holds Rachel out a window, and Batman says, "Hey man, let her go," which was not a very good choice of words. Using his armor, Bruce is able to save her though, and they land on top of a taxi. The next day, Bruce and Alfred debate the Joker's motive, but Alfred doesn't think the Joker has a motive at all, as some men just want to watch the world burn. So meanwhile, an accountant at Wayne Enterprises named Coleman Reese has found information linking Lucius to the Batmobile designs. He attempts blackmail, but Lucius is like, "Dude, do you really want to blackmail Batman?" And he's like, "Yeah, good point." So even though they just killed the judge and the police commissioner, and the mayor is probably next, they decide, screw it, let's just have this big ass public funeral with the mayor smack dab in the middle of everything, because that's incredibly smart. And sure enough, after following a lead on an apartment linked to the Joker, upon entering, Bruce finds all of the military guard tied up. The Joker and his allies have taken the role as the new military guard, and they aim their guns at the mayor. However, Gordon takes the bullet for the mayor, which apparently kills him. Well, that sucks. Obviously, Batman is enraged at this, and he decides to dump Sal Maroni off a balcony. Meanwhile, Harvey's doing an interrogation of his own on one of Joker's men, but Batman stops him, revealing that that man is an insane Arkham patient. Batman has then decided that the only way to stop this is to turn himself in, which is exactly what he plans to do. Next day at the press conference, Bruce is all ready to turn himself in, but Harvey has other ideas as he himself reveals him to be the Batman. He's not, but screw it, let's just go with it. Rachel is not too happy about this though, and she gives a letter to Alfred to give to Bruce later on. So that night, in the middle of everything, they're having a police convoy transporting Harvey Dent, and come on, you just knew the Joker was going to attack this. Luckily, Batman's here to even the odds, and the SWAT team van driver's pretty good as well. Batman ends up wrecking the Batmobile beyond repair though, and he decides to self-destruct it and go with the Bat Cycle instead. Batman then very nicely and very calmly gets the Joker out of his car before he attempts to run him over. He chickens out the last second though and wipes out, but before the Joker can cut a smile into him, he's stopped by Gordon. Oh, guess who's alive? And then Harvey Dent is led away by some totally not corrupt police officers to a totally secure location. But they have the Joker in custody, and the mayor is so impressed that he's gonna name Gordon commissioner. Everybody's happy for him, and I mean everybody. But Gordon's not so happy, as turns out Harvey Dent has gone missing. And now it's time for probably the best scene of the entire movie, and one of the best scenes I've ever seen in any movie, the interrogation interrogation scene. So the Joker reveals to Gordon that some of his cops work for the mob, and Gordon decides to let Batman handle this. Joker tries to convince Batman that he's just a freak like him, and eventually, all the normal people will turn on him. Batman gets fed up with this pretty quick though, and he decides to get a little more physical. But then the Joker reveals that it wasn't just Dent that he took Rachel as well. This sends Batman into a blind rage, and he beats the ever-living shit out of the Joker until he gives up Harvey and Rachel's locations. Batman decides to go after Rachel, while the police force goes after Harvey. Harvey and Rachel both wake up, and luckily the Joker set up a phone so they can both talk to each other. While trying to get free though, Harvey topples over and takes a barrel of oil with him, which ends up coating one side of his face. All is also not well back at the police station, as Joker has broken free, but don't worry, he just wants his phone call. Turns out that phone call though is to activate a phone bomb, which is located in the belly of one of his crewmen. Batman then shows up at the warehouse, but turns out it's Harvey's location, not Rachel's. Batman gets Harvey out of there, but the police force is not quick enough, and the bombs go off, taking Rachel with it. And if things couldn't get even worse, the bombs start a fire outside of Harvey's warehouse, which burns the shit out of one half of his face. And if things couldn't get even worse than that, the Joker has escaped, and he's taken Lau with him. So permanently scarred, Harvey is now in the hospital. Alfred reads the letter that Rachel wrote to Bruce, in which she reveals that she was gonna marry Harvey Dent. Alfred was gonna give this letter to Bruce, but he sees how depressed he is and he thinks better of it. So for whatever reason, Sal Maroni decides it's time to get rid of the Joker, and he tips the police off about the Joker's location. The Joker meanwhile takes Cheech out of the location and burns his money pile, which had Lau on top of it, and fun fact, apparently they wanted to show a scene where Lau was being burned alive on top of the money pile, but that also pushed the R rating, so they had to take it out. And man, if things couldn't get any freaking worse, Coleman Reese, that accountant from earlier who tried to blackmail Lucius, is on the news, threatening to reveal the identity of the Batman. Joker doesn't want that though, and he calls into the news, saying that if Coleman Reese is not killed within the next hour, he'll blow up a hospital, because that seems like a reasonable reaction. So as the hospitals are being evacuated, the Joker uses this opportunity to have a one-on-one meeting with Harvey. And he's able to pretty much convince Harvey that he's just a rabid dog with no real plan, and he shouldn't really be blamed for what happened to Rachel. He does give Harvey an opportunity to kill him though, so we'll see how that goes. Meanwhile, Gordon's still trying to protect Coleman Reese, and he gets a bit of an assist from Bruce Wayne. Oh, and hey, looks like Harvey didn't kill the Joker. Great, trying to blow up the hospital. Oh crap, the other bomb didn't go off though. Oh wait, no, never mind, there it is. Hospital destroyed. Speaking of Harvey, it's time for his revenge tour to start as he kills one of the dirty cops involved in Rachel's murder. Lucius Fox is about to get a shock of his own, as it turns out Bruce has wiretapped pretty much every phone in all of Gotham. Basically, he's using sonar to get frequency waves on all the phones in all of the city, so he can know the Joker's exact location at any time. Lucius decides to help him, but on the condition that the machine will either be destroyed, or he quit after it's over. Let's pick back up with Harvey's rampage as he decides to confront Sal Maroni. Maroni's able to survive the coin flip, but his car driver is not so lucky. So with people terrified and wanting out of Gotham, two ferries go to leave, one containing normal citizens, and the other containing hardened criminals who were all put away by Harvey Dent. They don't make it far though, as their engines both go out, and they both find presents from the Joker. So the Joker has given both ships a detonator, and basically, they have half an hour to blow the other ship up, or he'll just blow them both up. The prisoner ship is decisive that they're not going to do it, while the civilian ship decides to put it to a vote. Meanwhile, Harvey has used the other dirty cop to transport Gordon's family to a location of his choosing, so yeah, that's not good. Gordon and Batman, meanwhile, are preparing to raid the Joker's headquarters building. Joker has taken a bunch of nurses and doctors hostage, however, and they're all surrounded by armed gunmen. Upon entering, though, Batman realizes that the gunmen are actually the hostages, and the doctors and nurses are actually Joker's men. Batman, meanwhile, pretty much has to beat up the entire SWAT team, as they don't know who the hostages really are. After doing that, he makes it to the top, where he's promptly attacked by the Joker and some Rottweilers. Meanwhile, the ships have made their choice. An inmate played by Tiny Lister decides to throw the detonator out the window, while meanwhile on the civilian ship, one man is gonna do the bomb, but he decides, nah, I ain't gonna do this. And the Joker, who has Batman pinned down, cannot believe that they didn't blow each other up, but luckily he has his own detonator, so he's just gonna blow them both up. He doesn't quite get the chance though, as Batman yeets him off the building. And after Batman pulls him back up, the Joker reveals his biggest accomplishment, telling Batman that he's broken Harvey Dent's mind. And sure enough, he's exactly correct in that, as Harvey Dent is currently holding Gordon and his family hostage at the place where Rachel died. So Harvey's all prepared to shoot Gordon's like 7-year-old son, which is fucked up, but then Batman shows up and takes a bullet himself after he's unable to talk Harvey down. And before Harvey can decide the fate of Gordon's kid, Batman tackles them all off the building. Gordon's son is safe, but Batman and Harvey both fall. Batman's fine because of his armor, but Harvey's fucking dead. So Gordon realizes that everything's pretty much fucked now, as Harvey was the last symbol of hope for the city, but Batman's got a plan. He decides that in order to keep Harvey's reputation intact, he must take the fall for all of Harvey's crimes. And that's exactly what he does, as Gordon declares him an outlaw and destroys the bat symbol. Speaking of destroying stuff, Alfred burns that letter from Rachel, and Lucius shuts down the supercomputer. The movie ends with Batman riding off into the night with the police behind him, and Gordon proclaiming that he's the hero they deserve, but not the one they need right now. So even though I'm pretty sure you already know how this is gonna go, let's pull up our Dark Knight big board. And yeah, this should be obvious, even though Batman Begins is an incredible and incredibly underrated film, it's not as good as this. So here's our inaugural Batman big board. Dark Knight number 1, Batman Begins number 2. So where do we go after this? Well, we go to The Dark Knight Returns, the third and final film in this trilogy, and unfortunately the least good film in this trilogy. It's not a bad film per se. Tom Hardy was great as Bane and had an alright plot, but it just had a lot to live up to, and it really couldn't do it. It was almost impossible. And apparently also a lot of the script had to be rewritten, as the Joker was actually going to be in that movie, but they sure as hell weren't going to recast Ledger. You know, I said so much in the intro, I'm struggling to find words for this outro. There's really not much to say. This is my favorite film of all time. I absolutely love this movie. I'm so excited that I was finally able to do this for the channel. Like, this is one of the films I had in mind when I made up the channel. When I made the channel initially, I had the MCU in mind, I had Godzilla in mind, I had this trilogy in mind, and I had Star Wars in mind. Star Wars might come in the future. I don't know. Those movies are long, but I'm sure it will come in the future. Man, will it? I don't know. I really don't want to watch Attack of the Clones again. We'll see. But this film was one of the big films I had in mind. I'm really happy that I was able to talk about it. I also sit here and wonder if this will be my longest review ever. My current longest, I think, is Iron Man 3, and I am passionate about that movie as well. I'm passionate about how much it pisses me off, but it's still passion. In conclusion, though, I'm just passionate about how this is my favorite film ever. This is the best film I've ever seen, obviously the best superhero film I've ever seen, and if you want to see the peak of superhero entertainment, then please, go watch The Dark Knight if you haven't already. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to do it for my review of the second film in the Dark Knight trilogy, The Dark Knight. Next week, I actually don't know yet. I have not made the schedule. I need to. I haven't done it yet, though. So I actually don't know what's coming on next week, but it'll be something, and I'm sure it'll be great. But that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to do it for me today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thank you guys for watching. If you liked it, be sure to leave the video a like. If you didn't, then don't. If you want to follow any of my social media links, they're all in the description down below. Thank you to all 73 of my patrons for supporting me and all my channel. I appreciate you guys. With all that being said, though, my name is Noah Taft. This has been my review of The Dark Knight 2008, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.